All right, so today we're going to try to unpack Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs. We know you're interested in this whole UAT thing, and we are too. So what we're going to do is pull out some of the most compelling parts of Elizondo's story and really explore what his revelations mean, for everyone.
Elizondo's story is interesting for sure, not just because of the UFOs, but because he pulls back the curtain on how the government's responding to it, or I guess not responding to it.
Exactly. And it's not like this is just some random guy off the street we're talking about.
Right.
This is someone with real experience and intelligence. And, he was in the Pentagon working on this.
Yeah, he was in the military for years and even spent some time as a counterintelligence agent.
Wow.
He even messed around with remote viewing a little, which kind of shows you how open his mind was to things that are, out of the ordinary.
Yeah, if someone with that kind of background was telling me about these encounters, and I was supposed to be investigating threats to national security,
Right.
I would at least listen.
You would think so. But Elizondo was constantly hitting roadblocks.
Really?
He talks about this group, the Collins Elite.
Okay.
These were officials in the Air Force who were actively trying to discredit the whole UAP thing and shut down investigations.
But why? What was their motivation?
Well, Elizondo gives a few possible reasons.
Okay.
Some were worried about looking weak on the world stage.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Like if we admit we don't understand these objects, it might make us look bad.
Right.
Others thought UAPs were like a spiritual thing, even demonic.
Really?
Not something that science should be looking into.
Wow. So not just bureaucratic stuff, but actual, resistance, even ridicule.
Exactly.
Sounds like a movie or something. But here's the thing that gets me. Even with all that pushback, he still uncovered some pretty crazy information,
Oh, yeah?
He talks about his work with ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Right.
And the weird cases they were investigating.
And don't forget, this wasn't some tiny little project. Senator Harry Reid got $22 million in funding for it. That's serious money, even if it was mostly kept secret.
Okay, so let's talk about some specific cases that Elizondo looked into. When you read the book, what really stood out to you?
Well, there are so many that are fascinating, but I think the one that always comes to mind is the Nimitz carrier strike group encounter from 2004.
Oh, yeah.
The one with the Tic Tac?
The Tic Tac. Multiple Navy pilots saw this thing. It was tracked on radar. They even got it on video.
Right.
And these are highly trained professionals. We're not talking about, some weekend warriors out for a joyride.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning.
Oh, wow.
Elizondo talks about triangular UAPs that seem to be messing with predator drones.
No way.
He even mentions a case where a helicopter crew saw this huge round thing come up out of the ocean and pull a missile underwater.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
Yeah, pretty wild.
So we've got these bizarre objects doing things that break our understanding of physics.
Right.
Elizondo lists 5 key things about them. Hypersonic speed, instantaneous acceleration, moving between air and water like it's nothing.
Transmedium travel.
Right. And then they're hard to see and they seem to generate lift without any visible means of propulsion.
Yeah, those observables are important.
Yeah.
Because they point to technology that's way beyond anything we've got.
Right. And if you think about it, that's where the national security issue comes in.
Exactly.
I mean, if we're dealing with something that's that much more advanced than us, wouldn't you want to, learn as much as you could about it?
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But instead of investigating these things openly and scientifically, Elizondo describes this culture of secrecy and denial.
Really?
In the Pentagon.
It's almost like they were more scared of what they might find than the objects themselves.
It does seem that way, and that leads us up to a big moment in Elizondo's story.
Okay.
His decision to leave the Pentagon.
Right. This was a turning point.
Yeah.
He basically realized the government's refusal to take this UAP threat seriously was putting us all at risk.
Exactly. He felt like he had to tell people, even if it meant sacrificing his career.
Wow. And that's where things get really interesting, because he didn't just disappear. He went public with everything.
He did, and he had a plan to make things change. So he didn't just, go out and tell everyone.
Right.
He had a plan. He called it the 5 pillars of engagement.
Okay, the 5 pillars of engagement. What's that all about?
So it was like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
First, he wanted to work with Congress to get some oversight, and funding for UAP research. Get it out in the open.
Okay.
Second, he knew the media was key to raising awareness, put some pressure on the government.
Yeah.
And then finally, he wanted to build relationships within the intelligence community itself to get support for disclosure from the inside.
So he was playing the long game.
Exactly. He's trying to change the whole system.
And to be fair, he wasn't starting from nothing.
Yeah.
Remember that $22 million program Senator Reid got going?
Yeah.
What happened with that?
Well, Elizondo says they did a detailed report on the Nimitz case, but it got pushback from the Air Force and the intelligence community.
Wow.
Even with Senator Reid backing it, they wouldn't take it seriously.
Which is crazy when you think about what it could mean. I mean, if this technology is decades or even centuries ahead of us,
Right.
isn't that a huge national security problem?
You'd think so, but for a long time, the government seemed more focused on burying it than actually figuring it out.
Right.
Elizondo thinks it's part of a bigger cover-up. They're trying to keep the public in the dark.
Okay. So back to Elizondo and his plan.
Yeah.
Those 5 pillars of engagement, did it actually work?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the first big wins was in 2020. They put some UAP stuff in the COVID relief bill.
What, the COVID relief bill?
Yep. It was kind of hidden in there, but it was a big deal.
Wow.
It made the Pentagon put out a report on UAPs, which was a huge victory for transparency.
Okay.
And that report, when it finally came out, led to them setting up a new office to investigate UAPs. They called it AOIMSG.
AOIMSG, catchy. So now we had a group in the government whose whole job was to look into these encounters.
Right? It was a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But AOIMSG was still limited,
In what way?
Not enough money, not enough power. Elizondo and others kept pushing for more.
Okay.
And that brings us to the next big win. They set up AOAR, another acronym to remember. What's the difference?
AOR is bigger, and it's got a wider scope. They investigate anything unexplained, not just UAPs, airspace, sea, even underwater.
Yeah.
It was part of the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, and they included something Elizondo had been fighting for: whistleblower protection.
Whistleblower protections.
Yeah, so people who know about UAPs,
Right.
especially the ones who sign those non-disclosure agreements, they can come forward without being afraid of getting in trouble.
So that means people in the government and the military who've seen things can finally talk about it.
Exactly. It was a huge step forward.
Sounds like things were starting to change.
Yeah, they were. But even with all that, Elizondo doesn't shy away from the creepier side of UAPs. He talks about the connection to nuclear technology.
Right. This is one of the scariest patterns that comes out of his research. He describes all these cases where nukes went offline when UAPs were around,
Really?
both here in the U.S. and in other countries.
That's terrifying. Are they trying to tell us something?
It's a big question that hangs over the whole book.
Yeah.
Are they keeping an eye on our nukes? Are they worried we'll blow ourselves up? Or is it something weirder, something we don't even understand?
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah, it is. But Elizondo doesn't just leave us hanging. He looks at some possible answers, even some pretty far-out ideas about how their tech might work.
Okay. Like what?
He talks about a physicist named Hal Puthoff,
Okay.
who thinks UAPs might be using some loophole in the laws of physics, like bending space-time to move the way they do.
Bending space-time sounds like science fiction.
I know, right? But Puthoff's a serious scientist, and his ideas are based on real physics.
Interesting. So this whole thing is making us rethink what's possible.
Exactly.
Whoa.
What we thought was impossible might not be. And if that's true, what else could we be wrong about?
Okay, so we've talked about Elizondo's journey, the things he had to deal with, the evidence he found, and the laws he helped change. But then he drops this bombshell at the end, the legacy program. What is that?
This is where it gets really murky. Elizondo claims there's this super secret program, running outside the normal chain of command. It's got its own money, its own agenda, and access to stuff that would freak out even the biggest skeptic.
So now we're not just talking about seeing these things from afar. We're talking about having pieces of them, studying them, maybe even trying to reverse engineer them.
That's what he's saying. And it brings up a lot of ethical and philosophical questions that we haven't even begun to think about.
Yeah, like if we have this technology, what are we doing with it? Who's controlling it? And what are the dangers?
Exactly. And I can see why Elizondo went public. If this is really happening, people need to know.
Okay, so we're back, and we're getting into the really deep stuff now. The legacy program, Elizondo, makes it sound like it's so secret. It makes all the other UAP stuff look like child's play.
Yeah, he says this program is totally off the grid. It's got its own funding, its own goals, and access to things that would make any scientist do a double take.
We're talking about pieces of UAPs, right? Like not just photos, but actual physical material.
Yeah, he describes materials that have been analyzed, and they have properties that just don't make sense, according to our understanding of physics. And Elizondo says he actually held a piece of this recovered tech, something that was taken out of a service member after a UAP encounter.
Wow. What was it like?
He said it was like a microchip, but embedded in living tissue.
Living tissue. Wait a minute. Is he saying these objects are somehow biological?
That's one of the many questions the book raises.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this legacy program, if Elizondo's right, he's not answering to anyone. Not Congress, not even the president.
That's a little scary, isn't it? A rogue program with technology that could change the world and no one's in charge.
It is a bit unsettling.
Yeah.
And it gets even weirder. Elizondo mentioned some high-ranking officials like Admiral Thomas Wilson who tried to find out about this program, and they were completely shut down. He even says some people who knew about it threatened those who got too close, like they could lose their jobs, their pensions, even their lives.
Okay, now this is starting to sound like a conspiracy theory. Is there any proof to back this up?
Elizondo does give some specific details. He names people, mentions documents, even hints at physical evidence that supports the idea of the legacy program.
Okay, but what kind of evidence? We're talking about like government documents or something?
Well, he describes an alleged autopsy report of being recovered from a crashed UAP with anatomy that's totally alien.
I mean, I want to believe this stuff, but it's hard, you know? It's just so out there.
I get it. But we're talking about objects breaking the laws of physics. Maybe we need to rethink what out there even means.
That's a good point. So what's the point of this legacy program? What are they trying to do?
Elizondo thinks they're trying to reverse engineer the technology.
So if they figure it out, it's a challenge, that's for sure. But it's also a pretty amazing time to be alive, you know?
Yeah, Elizondo's message is that we're at the beginning of a new era, one where we can't deny the reality of other intelligent life anymore. It's up to us to figure out how to handle it, how to shape this future.
Well, that's our deep dive into Luis Elizondo's Imminent. It's a book that really makes you think. It's full of questions that keep you up at night and possibilities that blow your mind.
And this is just the beginning. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and never stop looking up.